history has to be reconciled in order for us to move forward in a way that's not just appropriate, but rooted in equality.
Treat me the way you treat anybody else.
We all have something different, but it doesn't get in our way. That things are possible, let's go do it.
Here at Rocky Mountain PBS, we want to create connection by sharing the voices of people from across Colorado who haven't always been seen and heard. I'm Dana Knowles, and for the start of the new year, we're sharing the voices of some of the most impactful people we've met and invite you to help us continue our mission. This includes one of the women behind the first statewide prison radio show. Cynthia Gonzalez wants to control her own narrative. She's 25 years into a life sentence for felony murder, and her message to the outside world is that rehabilitation for incarcerated people is possible.
I'm about to record a regular top of the hour station ID spot. You're listening to Inside Wire Colorado Prison Radio. And I'll just save it, and then I could either add music to it or just leave it like that, and it'll just play at the top of the hour or throughout the day. Simple as that. My name is Cynthia Gonzalez. We're at Denver Women's Correctional Facility and the Inside Wire studio. We produce spots, content spots for the radio station.
Inside Wire Colorado Prison Radio is the first statewide prison radio station in the country and the first in the world to stream to the public. We have incarcerated producers who are creating all of the content under the guidance of Ryan Canaro, our general manager of Inside Wire.
This is our Inside Wire studio. This is Amber Pierce, my co-worker, hard at work.
We're following a sort of community radio model: music, talk, entertainment, stories. When we talk about the storytelling pieces, the narrative pieces, I talk a lot with the teams that I get to work with inside facilities about the fact that one of their sort of superpowers is that they live here. They're here in prison, and their perspective on that, on what life is like here and what the system is, has been, could be, is unique.
He's constantly working with us, and he's a really good teacher, he's a very good boss. This is all his markings of working hard with us. It is about connecting with people. I have life without parole for a felony murder charge. I know that as a person, I've caused harm, and I know that I can't take that back. And every day I wake up in here and I think about my victim's family. When I came into prison, I was just a teenager. I've been incarcerated for 25 years now, and probably for a good 20 years I coasted through my DOC sentence. And now I wake up every day with meaning and purpose, because I can be a voice for the facility, because I can connect our world to the community.
It was a very intentional, big, complex decision to say, we're going to stream this to the public. The public can tune in. I think that the possibility of complicating the narrative of a very two-dimensional view of what prison is and who is in prison is a really important thing. People live here, work here, they're growing and changing, and many of them choose to seek to better themselves.
I think that when we commit our crimes and we get sentenced to DOC, it just becomes like lock us up, throw away the key, and forget about us. And that's not how it is. We believe in bettering ourselves. Now, I can say that, hey, here's our chance to show the community that through our rehabilitation, we are making changes, and this is how we are making changes. And this is the only way we're going to show the community that we're different people now, that we've grown, that we've changed.
It's something that we as a culture usually avoid thinking or even talking about: death. But according to the Denver Death Wives, talking about it and understanding different afterlife options can help make these life-altering transitions a little bit easier. I'm Alexis Kukowen, and when I explored this taboo topic, the Death Wives opened up my perspective on facing the inevitable.
Death is spiritual. Birth is spiritual. And I think the reason that they are is because they're bigger than us. It's something that we don't have control over. If you've ever been able to be in the space when somebody's actively dying or when a baby's born, it changes you. I mean, it's just like exhilarating and a new life came in. And it's the same sort of big energy when somebody dies. And it's the same kind of big energy when you see the most epic sunset.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of big energy when you're like sitting in the river and you're looking around and there's just stillness. Like that's death, and it's humbling and it's beautiful.
And it's also life. Hi, I'm Erin.
And I'm Lauren.
And we're the Death Wives. At Death Wives, we want to make understanding death and learning about death accessible for people, because death, nobody escapes it. We're all going to experience it. And so how can we bring that to people in a way that's digestible and easy to access and even affordable?
And you can see here our different courses that we offer, which we have quite a few right now.
So we started teaching a scope of practice of classes online, from skills like what does a death doula do, to a class where you plan your own funeral, to classes where we're talking about the environmental impacts of different final disposition methods. Nobody wants to talk about what happens to bodies when they die, but something does, and we think it's empowering for people to know what those options are. A death doula supports a person through their end-of-life experience. There are a lot of death doulas whose main focus, as ours has become over time, is education, because they recognize that when somebody's just lost someone they love, then they don't know what to do. They're like a deer in the headlights, and they're going to do what is expedient or easy or
what their neighbor did, which might be the traditional funeral home where they spend $10,000. So that's where the education part really comes in, is they need to know what a death doula is. They need to know what their end-of-life options are, because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. There's nothing we can do to change that.
Yeah.
We are not a one-size-fits-all society. We're not one-size-fits-all humans. So why should our death care be that way?
You are looking at, essentially an altar. An altar can be anything, right? That is tributing someone who has died, who you love, and who you want to actively have in your space. So this is a photo of my sister, Stacy, who died in February. And I have her ashes here, only they're not actually ashes, they're ground up bones, because she had water cremation rather than fire cremation. My work has helped me tremendously during this time in terms of knowing what to do, what steps to take next, and what all of my options are. So that's a lot of what we teach, and I was really grateful that I knew what to do. I knew that she wanted water cremation. I knew that she wanted to become flowers in a garden and be returned to the earth. I knew that when we had a viewing, which we think is really important for people to be able to see the bodies of their loved ones after they die, she would want to look amazing. People have choices about all of this.
So I believe the reason that death is so taboo in America is because it's literally behind closed doors. Here in America, people go to the hospital, then they go to nursing homes. Families may never even visit them. The person dies, they call a funeral home. Funeral homes secretly will come and pick them up. And so if you don't know what it is or what it looks like, it's terrifying.
People are afraid of what they don't know. So that's really what we need to be looking at, is like, you're gonna die. Everybody that you love is gonna die. Why aren't you willing to look at it? It's because you're afraid. What are you afraid of? Let's talk about that.
A lot of people may not be scared of death, but they're scared of grief. You and I, we already mentioned, we're professional grievers. So we're like, oh, bring it. Like, I'll cry with you, I'll weep with you. And so when you know that there's this tidal wave of grief coming, it's a lot easier to like turn into a little ball and try to ignore it versus walk towards it. Because that's terrifying. Having your heart broken and knowing it's about to break is terrifying. And that's where we find out that we're not alone in it. And then it's not so scary when we can cry together, when we can celebrate the life together.
This is so important, and this year a group of hikers gave me a deeper understanding of why. I'm Jeremy Moore, and I met the audio trekkers at the YMCA of the Rockies in Estes Park. They're a team with a theme: treat us like anyone else and give us access.
If you take somebody who feels like they have a barrier, no matter what it is, and you can get them in the outdoors to climb a mountain or raft a river, then all those normal things around you, like going back to school or getting a job or even just going to the mailbox, it doesn't seem as hard. Because if you can summit a mountain, you can make it to your mailbox.
In some ways, I am kind of underestimated. Just treat me the way you treat anybody else that you'd find.
We all have something different, but it doesn't get in our way. That things are possible, let's go do it.
I've always kind of had the philosophy, if something hits you in the face, get up and keep on moving.
Homeless people, when I walk the 16th Street Mall, come up and say they're praying for me, just whatever. And I came to realize it's just a way for people to connect with me.
If you make something accessible and you give people the chance to do it, they can do it. Their disability disappears. My name is Penn Street, and we are at the YMCA of the Rockies in Estes Park, Colorado. I love the outdoors, and I love hiking and getting people with disabilities outdoors.
My name is Evan Starnes, and I will be turning 21 in October. My disability is called Leber's congenital amaurosis. It's basically a condition that affects eyesight, but it can also come with other conditions such as autism or ADHD.
Ready to go. Handsome as always.
We're here for the No Barrier Summit and the What's Your Everest hike. It's a fundraising hike for us as an organization.
Audio Information Network of Colorado is an amazing organization. We've been around for over 30 years.
Good job, Karen, you did it.
We were founded by a man who was blind. He wanted to bring print to life for people who are blind and visually impaired. He put together a ton of volunteers to read most of Colorado's newspapers, magazines, anything that's in print that is not accessible to somebody like me. I'm visually impaired. I'm totally blind in my right eye, and I just have a little peripheral in my left eye. There's this huge gap with people with disabilities being able to hike. It's hard to get up here unless you have a driver. So if you don't have a driver, you have to Uber or Lyft. And then just the accessibility part, like what trail do I take? What do I even take on the trail? How long is it? How hard is it? I wanted to take away those barriers and just create an amazing hike.
It's beautiful. I mean, I'd say the weather is probably like in the lower 70 degrees. It seems super sunny. It's nice and breezy. My name is Ellie White, and we are at Bible Point. Just did about a 1.5 mile or 2 mile hike up the mountain. I'm blind, but I actually have a rare genetic disorder called Wolfram syndrome that causes type 1 diabetes, progressive vision loss. It can cause progressive hearing loss. Luckily, I'm not affected by that yet. It can eventually affect your coordination and possibly even your breathing. And it's a terminal disorder with a life expectancy of 30 to 40 years old. So you just gotta do what you can while you still can do it. Technically, I was born with it, but I wasn't officially diagnosed with it until I was 7 years old. And when I was diagnosed, I was the only one in Colorado because the equipment that is needed for the diagnosis and the knowledge of this disorder is so rare. I gotta raise awareness so, medical centers can diagnose people properly, and I'm raising money to try to help find a cure and help fund research, and, I'm not going down without a fight.
Most people with eye vision problems, they have it since they were young, or it progresses as it gets worse and worse and worse. I lost mine overnight. My name is Dean Lewis. I have low vision and I have an autoimmune system disorder. It's called NMO, which stands for neuromyelitis optica. There's no known cure for this. They don't know how people get it. I was actually driving my truck at work one day, and the next day I was in the hospital blind as a bat. Before this happened, I used to go to the mountains all the time. Nowadays, not so much. These groups and these support groups allow me to come out and socialize with people who have the same problems I have. When you're at home alone, you're home alone, and I like getting out and being with people.
I think it's a good way to socialize. It's a good way to network. Usually when people lose their vision, they kind of go into this isolation and they don't socialize and they don't do what they should. And so this is a great opportunity to get out there and get some skills in. You know, if you're newly blind, you can get some orientation skills in, and you can meet other people that are in the same boat as you.
Hi there. For me, it was not only to finally get to do this event, but to spend time with my daughter. I asked my daughter when we reached a place with an overlook, I said, please just describe what you're seeing, the way you see it. And she did that, and I picture in my mind that exact what she's telling me.
There's an awful lot of information that you get just from the sense of smell and the feelings that are around, but you don't necessarily pay attention to it because vision and hearing are such strong senses, like they're so dominant. Essentially, I have vision loss and hearing loss, so a dual sensory loss referred to as being deafblind, which is secondary to having Stickler syndrome. What it is that's a degenerative connective tissue disorder. Both my parents had disabilities, and I just never thought of myself as really having one. I usually thought of myself as having to convince other people that I could do whatever it was that was needed, but I just needed to find a different way.
Anyone stuck on the hill?
There are many ways to reach the same place.
Everybody has a different reason for being here. And this year we have over 30 blind and visually impaired people, and then we have 30 guides, volunteers that came to help guide the group. We came up with audio trekkers as our team name. When I came up to the top today and people were yelling, you know, audio trekkers over here, we're gonna do a photo. I have enough vision that I could kind of see all the blue in the shirts. It was just like the sea of blue on this rock with this gorgeous view behind them. And it really got me emotional because it's like, we can do this. So I'm proud of every single one of them. And it was so beautiful being out there with so many blind people.
3, 2, 1.
The only thing that makes somebody disabled is if they don't have access. Where if you create that access, there is no disability, no matter what it is.
Artist Greg Deal of Pyramid Lake Paiute descent has spent his career infusing contemporary art spaces with reflections of the realities of the brutal mentality that laid the foundation of the American West. He grew up in Utah, biking with his dad on day trips that to this day inspire his advocacy work. I'm Kate Perdoni, and this summer I followed Greg as he endeavored a 150-mile bike ride from a suburb of Colorado Springs to the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site, a remote location that reveals how the West was won.
My history with cycling is, growing up with bikes. And of course, bikes were sort of the symbol of freedom when I was a kid. I grew up in a ski resort mining town in Utah, and so, you're just out exploring. My dad rode bikes a lot, and I wanted to be a lot like my dad. We used to do little trips together. We carried our own water, our own food, our own supplies and gear. At the time, it was pretty extreme and pretty unheard of. Not so much now, nothing's extreme anymore, so. We're traveling just under 150 miles from the outskirts of northern Colorado Springs to the Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. We can maybe raise a little bit of awareness about those spaces as we make a journey to it. Even just in terms of the bike ride, like we're talking about history, and history plays a pretty big part. Crossover story for me is being an artist and being native. We're sensitive to the things that have happened here because these things have happened in our own homelands, in our own backyards. Do you want to see the bike I'm riding tomorrow? It's set up really specifically for gravel riding, because there's like a place to put water bottle down here, which I'll probably put on tonight. I have everything, we have everything we need, and it's gonna be hot, and we got a lot of water. In Colorado, we're so high up, the sun's close, it's exhausting. I have no doubt it's gonna suck tomorrow. When you actually start to break down the events of the Sand Creek Massacre, you begin to see a series of very deliberate choices that are not just upsetting, but really disturbing. Native people went to Denver and they were like, okay, we're here. And there's agreements in place, and they met with the acting governor, because this was still not American territory at the time. This was during the expansion west. And they met with people and said, what should we do? And they said, you should go over here, and then we'll talk soon. And after they left, and in stating that they would be safe, they deliberately went, took up arms, walked down there, and took everybody out. It was a complete massacre of unarmed people who were exercising their right to simply exist. They were booking, but I think a lot of it has to do with like how cool it was, being fresh in the morning, a lot of downhill, and most of the climbing were like short climbs that you could just kind of push through, and then the climbs got increasingly longer as we were going. It was a lot of fun at first, and then after about mile 50 and the heat really started kind of taking hold. Oh, the heat's setting in. I am sweating like a madman. It's been dirt roads. I don't know, after 50 miles, I think, is where I started kind of feeling it. So just trying to eat and drink as much as possible. But those washboards are killer, man. We got a mile climb coming up. I mean, you were just sinking in the sand and fishtailing. I would stop a lot, regroup, and then could continue on. I was struck by really just how incredibly harsh the landscape is. It's rural, working class, farmers, ranchers.
On the plains of southeastern Colorado, the part that no one really thinks about, there's a lot of cattle ranch land out here. You can get beautiful cloud formations you can watch out here, and you can see almost forever. We are currently here at Sand Creek Massacre National Historic Site. The Sand Creek Massacre was an attack on a Cheyenne and Arapaho camp in November of 1864. The people in the camp at Sand Creek were mostly women, children, and the elderly, trying to establish a peace. And also included in that number was about 33 chiefs and headmen of the two tribes. That's a large number of leaders for a camp that size. Some of the chiefs started to walk out to meet the soldiers, indicating the camp was peaceful. Soldiers, however, weren't here to talk, and they opened fire on the chiefs coming out to meet them. Soldiers were firing at anyone they could see. According to stories passed down by survivors, some people were pursued up to 10 miles away.
The actual site isn't just along the tree line that we can see here, but it actually spans out miles from this site. It's vast specifically because they realized, after really doing the research on the events that happened here, that people ran for miles to get away and were hunted down for miles. These are not things that exist within popular culture, or at least in the understanding of basic American history. These are the things that need to be talked about. These are the spaces of our forebears. Any sort of awareness that this place exists and the story of this place, I think, is pretty important. So I made it just over 90 miles. Towards the end of that 90 miles, I was mostly thinking like, okay, one more mile. And I was clearly starting to suffer some heat exhaustion. I just had to call it as is. Definitely want to try to do it again, probably in the fall. You have to want to come here to come here. This is not an obvious destination. Like you really have to put in some work to find this place. Most people don't even know this is here. I think that that's really reflective of the way that Native people are sort of D-list actors in American history. And being in danger of repeating history has to do with not knowing your history. I mean, unless you're a monster that knows your history and just wants to repeat history.
Sand Creek is not just an event that's relegated to history, that was a product of its time. It's present. Being able to acknowledge those things and trying to make connections to modern times is the most important aspect that I see.
History has to be reconciled in order for us to move forward in a way that's not just appropriate, but rooted in equality. I also maintain the most segregated place in the United States is within history, because we learn about white history, but we don't learn about Native history or Mexican history or Black history. And when we do learn about those things are separated into their own little compartments. All history is history, and there's aspects in that history that we need to be accountable for. No matter where we are on, treading, walking, riding, driving on indigenous lands.
Thank you to all of you who shared your stories with us. We'll continue to share more Coloradan stories throughout 2023 and beyond. And reach out to us if you have an idea of someone who should be featured. Email coloradovoices@rmpbs.org.